So, our argument is, should marijuana be legal to sell, grow, and use? And I'm pro for that. So, the summary of the facts of uh, marijuana being legal is famously voters in Colorado and Washington legalized marijuana in November of 2012. Both states only permit personal recreational use of marijuana by adults 21 or older. Colorado was able to implement legal retail marijuana shops since January 1st, 2014, and Washington was slower to license recreational marijuana shops and started issuing licenses in July 2014. Other states have since followed their lead, including California and Massachusetts, both in 2016. So basically, the legalization of marijuana means you can't be arrested, ticketed, or convicted for using marijuana if you follow the state laws as to age, place, and amount for consumption. However, you can still get arrested for selling or trafficking marijuana if you aren't following state laws on licensure and taxation. For example, black market marijuana is still sold in Colorado despite legalization and is still illegal. Other states may soon also have laws and policies to legally control the market for marijuana, so consumers can buy it for their own use for a safe, legal source. So, for the analysis, I chose to look up some things on the internet, and what I found was when federal law and state law conflict, the federal law trumps the state law. But federal law doesn't permit marijuana sale and usage because it is illegal under Controlled Substance Act. But in states where marijuana has been legalized for recreational purposes, the state laws have been conflicting with federal law. If Colorado and Washington manage to keep their marijuana retail businesses completely in state, it may be legal. That means the marijuana must be grown, sold, and used, and taxed all within the state without using any federal land or means of commerce. This prevents the retail marijuana business from using banks, which are federally regulated. It also prevents marijuana businesses from deducting business expenses on their federal income taxes, even preventing farmers from using water from federally managed resources. The conflict between state and federal marijuana laws is likely to continue and ultimately require resolution, possibly in a decision by the Supreme Court. So, the logical arguments on why it should be changed is, one, the world will not collapse into chaos when marijuana is recreationally legalized. No, cannabis consumers are not going on violent rampages through the city. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Violent crime and property crimes have both decreased in Colorado since the state legalized recreational cannabis. And in London, there was a study that a large drop in crime rates after cannabis was decriminalized for a year. 2. The prohibition of cannabis takes a financial and social toll on our society. There were over 658,000 arrests for marijuana possession in 2012 alone, and the majority of those arrests were non-violent, low-level offenders. Enforcing cannabis possession laws cost the U.S. approximately $3.6 billion annually. All of this time, cost, and effort takes out law enforcement away from enforcing more urgent issues. So cannabis has great medical applications. Despite the notions that many anti-cannabis people have that medical marijuana is nothing more than a lie, Studies are starting to show marijuana's potential in shrinking aggressive cancerous brain tumors, which to me is incredible. Furthermore, a recent American study found that treating epilepsy and other seizure disorders with CBD reduced seizures by 54%. Use of THC reduced use of THC also reduces depression and relieves anxiety for some people. Something to me that is very, very strange is that cannabis is 114 times less toxic than that of other legal substance, alcohol, which has been legal forever. In a comparative analysis on the risks of recreational drugs, alcohol was the top contender, while cannabis was considered the lowest risk, making cannabis literally 114 times safer to use than alcohol, a legal substance for adults ages 21 and up. Just think about that for a second. And finally, cannabis generates revenue. Yes, the almighty dollar. No matter how you put it, money talks. Colorado's first year of legal cannabis provided $63 million in revenue, with an additional $13 million from licenses and fees. Not only that, but the money is going to great causes. $30.5 million goes right back to the taxpayers, rewarding those who voted for legislation, and the rest goes towards youth marijuana education programs, school construction, and the costs of regulation. And that is why I think that recreational marijuana should be legal to sell, grow, and be used all over the U.S. Thank you.
My name is Joseph Downing, and I'm arguing against the legalization of marijuana to sell and use and grow. So some background just on the current laws of marijuana. Despite 46 states having medical cannabis laws, marijuana is still federally illegal. Federal law does not even recognize the difference between recreational and medical marijuana. And it's actually a Schedule I drug, as listed by the government, meaning it has no medicinal benefits, and it's in the same category of addictiveness as heroin and cocaine, which I don't think anybody wants to legalize heroin and cocaine. So if you'd want to legalize that, then why would you want to legalize something that's equally as addictive and equally as harmful? So some of my main points against the legalization of marijuana, one of them has to do with the effect that it would have on the youth. So marijuana being legal would create a huge abundance and supply of marijuana and would greatly increase the accessibility to it. So essentially what the impact that this would have on the community, the youth would be able to obtain marijuana much more easily, and therefore would be much more likely to become addicted to the substance and become an active user. And marijuana is addictive in some ways, although it may not be chemically or physically addictive. Marijuana users are seen to have huge dependencies upon the drug mentally, and a lot of marijuana users become daily marijuana users, which can eventually affect your work life and your family life greatly. There's also another huge theory which we all kind of learned about as kids, and that would be the gateway theory. So essentially what this is saying is that although marijuana may not necessarily be the most harmful drug, it is a drug that can lead other people into trying other drugs. So essentially with the youth, for example, the youth could get their hands on marijuana and then eventually start searching for something else, try to get a better high off of it, eventually resorting to drugs such as heroin, cocaine, anything in that Schedule I drug class, which would be extremely detrimental to the youth because those are drugs that are highly addictive and highly harmful to the human body. Um, Another kind of huge argument against the legalization of marijuana can be seen in the results that has happened in Colorado specifically since its legalization. So, although marijuana does increase profits, profits really are not the only thing that we should be thinking of. Honestly, it's probably the last thing that we should be thinking of, and we should be thinking of health first and safety. So, ever since the legalization of recreational marijuana use in Colorado, drug related school suspensions and expulsions among the youth have increased by 32%, and 32% of those drug related expulsions, or the majority of that 32% of drug related expulsions, were from marijuana because it is so easily accessible in that state for the youth. Also, from 2011 to 2013, there was a 57% increase in marijuana related emergency room visits, meaning that these people that were using marijuana had to be rushed to the hospital because they were in immediate danger of their health. And hospitalizations in general, so including emergency room visits and just other hospital visits, actually increased by an astounding 82%. Also, in Colorado, since the legalization of marijuana, DUIs have gone up greatly, and this is due to people driving under the influence of marijuana. Marijuana is much harder to test for than alcohol, so it's hard for police to monitor that and monitor whether or not drivers are currently using marijuana. But it is just as dangerous and hazardous for the driver and for the other drivers on the road if someone is operating a vehicle under the influence of marijuana. So those would be some of my main points against the legalization of marijuana concerning the health of our nation and the safety of our nation, specifically relating to the youth. It can have extremely detrimental effects on the youth and can eventually lead to children becoming involved with other drugs, and other drugs can also very often result in violence and increased crime rates. So altogether, I do not think that marijuana should be legalized to sell or grow.